So unless you've been under a rock in the gaming world, you know the age-old story about Nintendo and Sony developing a partnership that would eventually make a CD add-on for the Super Nintendo that fell apart, and we eventually got the PlayStation, which revolutionized the entire gaming industry still to this day. Well, another comparison has been made to GRS and Arcade1Up, and that apparent relationship falling apart is now leading to the production of the GRS Build A Cade FU. Is it the same? Is it a parallel? How does it work? Let's talk about it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Michael B. So today, we don't have any gaming news to really share with you other than prices increasing yet again because of tariffs, companies not shipping. So let's talk about something a little bit different. My buddy Glenn Planamento posted something in one of his Facebook groups the other day comparing his situation with Arcade1Up and the release of the GRS Build A Cade FU to the situation Nintendo and Sony found themselves in eons ago in the gaming space. So I wanted to do a little bit of a comparison, talk about what's fact, what's fiction, and will it have the same result? Anyways, before we get into that, I want to say thank you so much, everybody, for checking out the video. Guys, I always appreciate the support. If this is your first time to the channel, you like what you see, go ahead, subscribe, click the bell for notification, all that YouTube jazz. So I always love breaking out this commercial, taking you guys in the Wayback Machine, talking about where Arcade1Up started and how these cheap arcade recreations really changed the scope of the gaming world. People like me that absolutely love nostalgia, consoles like the NES Classic and stuff like that. These arcades were a fun, inexpensive way to have an arcade in your home that you never dreamed would be possible. And one of the biggest fans of this product line initially was our buddy Glenn Planamento. Here's a video Glenn did 5 years ago where he actually traveled to New York when their headquarters were still there, and he met with the team from Arcade1Up to obviously advertise their product and to talk about opportunities for GRS and Glenn's products to possibly be implemented. Now from there, unless you haven't been paying attention, shit went down. I mean, Glenn at that time was also doing a show called The Retro Buzz with his buddy Steven and Cool Toy, where they were the #1 Arcade1Up YouTube podcast. In fact, they were so entwined with Arcade1Up that they had developed a partnership. Arcade1Up would regularly appear on the Retro Buzz, and they actually signed an agreement for them to be the official show with the Retro Buzz receiving cabinets in remuneration for this partnership. Unfortunately, Arcade1Up 86, that partnership basically broke their agreement and then signed a new deal with 1UP Weekly, with Retro Ralph and Console Kits, which was the first crack or chink in the armor from this relationship. Then on top of that, I think we all remember this story. I actually did a video on it. Glenn actually had the largest home arcade Facebook official channel for Arcade1Up. It was the official Arcade1Up global fan page, which then there was a further disagreement because Glenn put GRS on the front of it. They argued. Glenn ended up taking away the official branding from it, and then Arcade1Up went and turned Arcade1Up modding or something like that into the official Arcade1Up global fan page, basically stealing the fan page from Glenn. Then Glenn rebranded his page as the original Arcade1Up global fan page, and then continued to put his branding on there. And then last but not least, it's impossible to tell this story without talking about the Arcade1Up Tron cab. As people know, Glenn for years was building basically accessories or replacement buttons and joysticks to go into Arcade1Up cabinets to give them a more arcade accurate feeling. And one of the products that he came up with that he was selling was the GRS Tron joystick. And what Arcade1Up did was basically Glenn provided a sample to them, and they reverse engineered a piece of the joystick, stole it, used it in their product. That's how the story goes, and then did not compensate Glenn. Eventually, they admitted to Glenn and offered him a settlement, which Glenn refused to take. So we get to my point of today's video. I noticed a post in the official GRS Build A Cade FU global fan page the other day from Glenn Planamento, who posted up a situation revolving what was a historical moment, Sony and Nintendo breaking their partnership, would eventually led to the birth of the Sony PlayStation, and comparing that to his situation with Arcade1Up, saying that because of their breakup, it is now, Glenn is now releasing the GRS Build A Cade FU, and it's going to do the same thing that the PlayStation did. Now, I know a lot of people are on Glenn's side, and, I stand with Glenn, and maybe you feel the exact same way, that this Build A Cade FU is going to be an Arcade1Up killer, that it's going to come out, revolutionize the entire home arcade space, and make Arcade1Up absolutely, redundant. I mean, basically make nobody want them. But I've always said to Glenn, I don't know if the GRS Build A Cade FU actually competes with Arcade1Up. And I don't know if I think it's amazing. I love the product. I want one, but I don't know if it's going to be the same kind of revolution that the PlayStation was. So for those of you who don't know the whole backstory, what eventually happened was, at the time, consoles were coming out with CD add-ons. We had the TurboGrafx 16 CD from NEC, Sega came out with the Sega CD, so Nintendo were looking at developing their own CD technology, and they originally partnered with Sony, who were the leading CD manufacturers at the time, to come out with basically a CD add-on for the Super Nintendo. Now, the story is that, Nintendo completely backstabbed Sony, making comparisons to Glenn's situation, where, Arcade1Up backstabbed him. So then Sony said, fuck it, we're going to come out with our own console, and it completely changed the landscape. They stole licenses away from Nintendo, much like Final Fantasy. We got Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation, which really cemented that console. I will die in the grave for anybody to tell me anything else. The PlayStation was built on the back of Final Fantasy VII. I will say that over and over again. That's my personal bias, but I believe it. So there's a couple inaccuracies about that story. So the story is always told that Nintendo stabbed Sony in the back, but if you actually do your research, like, going to a Wikipedia page, and you go down and you actually look at the betrayal was actually Sony. Sony betrayed Nintendo, and Nintendo did a rebuttal betrayal. So what actually happened, the argument that came up from them was Sony wanted to control licensing for the CD versions of the games for the Super Nintendo disc format. Nintendo tried to work a way around this problem, but of course Sony refused. So the alternative Nintendo suggested was to have Nintendo control the profits and licensing for the PlayStation. Here's the actual betrayal. Everybody thinks it was Nintendo, but it was actually Sony. Nintendo found out Sony was planning to backstab them by obtaining most or all of the profits and leaving Nintendo next to nothing. So it actually wasn't Nintendo that backstabbed Sony. It was originally Sony that were planning to screw over Nintendo. So the story isn't always how it looks on the outside. So what actually happened, and the actual betrayal most people remember, was the day that Sony announced they were doing the basically partnership with Nintendo, developing a new console add-on for the Super Nintendo, and then Nintendo the very next day said, no, we're not working with Sony, we're working with Philips on the Super Nintendo CD add-on. This was in response to Sony's betrayal, where they were going to cut Nintendo out of the profits. Now, I do want to go back to Glenn going to, Arcade1Up at this time. Glenn obviously had a close relationship with Arcade1Up, and Glenn was very adamant that Arcade1Up should use his products in their arcades. That's what Glenn wanted, and we probably would have got better products if they had chose to do that, but everybody knows what Arcade1Up is. Arcade1Up have always had bad controls. That's never been on their focus. Their focus is on recreating the nostalgic arcade experience, making sure the art's there, having the right licenses, and they've always gone with cheaper controls. So Glenn, being who he is, I'm sure he did everything he could to give them the controls at the lowest price point, but they still wanted to choose the cheaper option. So they were always resistant to taking on Glenn's products, even though he provided them to them for them to consider. Now, where this gets messed up, there's no partnership in place or no agreement that they're going to work together. It's just Glenn providing his products for them to review, to consider using in their products. So no actual partnership was formed like with Sony and Nintendo. Now, of course, I've already covered Arcade1Up's betrayal of Glenn in many ways. I mean, this company really did not show Glenn a lot of respect, but probably the worst part still has to be the Tron joystick, how they use components, supposedly use components that are part of his joystick, the way that it actually locks in. Specifically, that was a GRS design by Glenn's words. So that is the one that really broke the bank on this and made Glenn decide that he was going to come out with his own product. And as we know, Glenn is not the biggest fan of Arcade1Up. So, of course, a lot of people that take Glenn's side on the matter, and I'm not saying they shouldn't, but they're of the mind that, yes, the GRS Build A Cade FU is going to be an Arcade1Up killer. I mean, why would anybody ever buy an Arcade1Up again when you can buy the GRS Build A Cade FU? But I don't think it's that simple. Like, we're talking about apples and oranges here, in my opinion. What Glenn is building is, in essence, a multicade. It's a really cool multicade, probably the best multicade on the market when you compare it price to quality. And then the people buying Arcade1Up, I don't think they really care about multicades. Sure, some of them do, but the majority of people are looking for an inexpensive arcade recreation that they can buy for about, $500 or less, hopefully, and then stick in their home that has the artwork, has all that stuff that makes them feel like they have the arcade in their home. And I think that's some of the disconnect between this theory that people come up with, that the GRS Build A Cade FU is in fact going to be an Arcade1Up killer. Now, will Arcade1Up die and will they alienate their fan base? Probably. I mean, I don't think Glenn has to do anything for that to happen. I think Arcade1Up is doing a good enough job of that on their own. As you can see with the quality of the products we now have to buy, like the Arcade1Up Classic SE Edition, with their, a 17-inch 16:9 screen and the new slim form factor. Plus, you take into consideration their absolutely god-awful marketing strategies and how they've moved away from working with the people like Cool Toy, Retro Ralph, the Retro Buzz originally, people that were competent and had skills to do this, and now they've just turned to basically any jam come lately with their reviews. They're basically just looking for people that are going to provide positive reviews with no negative feedback or negative opinions. That's where we're to now with Arcade1Up. Not to mention their own social media, which this is on, by the way. This is their video that they are currently showing to people, and their own homegrown efforts, which have just become absolutely so hard to watch and so disconnected from their fan base. So, I mean, the target obviously is the company that wronged you, and with Glenn, you would assume the target would be Arcade1Up, but here, Glenn's actual product he's competing against is in the multicade market. Like, really, it's a one-for-one competition between you can build a GRS Build A Cade FU or you can buy an AtGames Legends Ultimate. I mean, these are both multicades. You can put all your games on. And really, at the price point of $899.99, and then Glenn saying he's coming in at under $1,000 for his GRS Build A Cade FU 19-inch monitor with power rotating screen. This is the real competition. Who else is Glenn going up against? third-party non-retail companies, something like a Rec Room Masters or the Megacade company I talked about earlier this year, companies like Retro Lizards, Buy Stuff Arcades, these companies making third-party quality arcade machines. That's who Glenn's competition is. It's the multicade market. That's who Glenn is going up against. So at the end of the day, is this a direct comparison to the situation with Nintendo and Sony compared to what happened with Arcade1Up and Glenn Planamento GRS? No, there is a small overlap. Even though Glenn's fan page has 32,000 fans or whatever it is, that doesn't mean that's 32 Arcade1Up owners that just said, I don't like arcade recreations anymore. I'm just going to buy the GRS Build A Cade FU. I'm not saying there's not some overlap. There is absolutely some people that will be like, holy shit, this arcade's incredible. Why would I buy another Arcade1Up? But the market, major share of the market for Arcade1Up is not going to be led astray by this. Even though you can do a Nintendo conversion kit, you also have to keep in mind how much extra that's going to cost. And the reason most people buy Arcade1Ups, they don't want to do the modding shit in the first place. There is a overlap again. Like I said, people that are cool at modding, gonna make a Nintendo cab. It's gonna be amazing. But most people just want to buy something that's pre-built, easy to use, game's already on it, let's go. Again, like I said, I think Glenn's biggest competition and the people that are going to be impacted by the release of the GRS Build A Cade is in fact going to be companies like AtGames that produce a retail level multicade, and then third-party companies like I mentioned, Rec Room Masters, that have these builds out there that you can do yourself. Why do that build when you can get a GRS Build A Cade, which has different control panels you can put in? You know, it's got Glenn's Viper board, it's got that 19-inch rotating screen. To me, that seems like it might be a multicade killer. That's what I would emphasize it as. But anyways, guys, I want to know your thoughts. Taking a look at that comparison, Nintendo to Sony, compared to Arcade1Up to the GRS brand. Do you think that it's relevant? Do you think that it's the same situation? And ultimately, do you think Glenn's Build A Cade FU will have the impact towards Arcade1Up that the PlayStation did towards Nintendo? Anyways, guys, thank you so very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And once again, this is Michael B. the Game Genie. I'll talk to you next time.